Good afternoon, early evening, everyone. We thank you for joining us today on an important conversation within our community, education equity, and how are we creating a better future for our kids during this environment. My name is Ashford Hughes, and I wear several hats in this panel. But the first part of that hat I want to recognize is my position, my role within the Knights of Prince Hall, which is the young men's mentoring arm of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Tennessee, Prince Hall affiliated. I wanted to give some recognitions before we start jumping right into this important dialogue. We want to recognize our Most Worshipful Grand Master for our Masonic organization, Prince Hall affiliated, Brother Lamont Banks. Our Knights of Prince Hall Grand State Director, Brother Bobby Pearson. Our Grand Worthy Matron, Sister Elizabeth Cross. Our Grand Worthy Patron, Brother Willie Jackson Sr. Sister Sandra McKenna, Grand Sunbeam Organizer, and Sister Bessie Sims, Assistant Grand Sunbeam Organizer. This is an important conversation to our community as we address issues of education with our young Black and brown boys within not only Middle Tennessee, but West Tennessee and everywhere across this state. So I want to kick it off to our moderator this evening, this early afternoon, Brother Kenyatta Lovett, to lead us through this dialogue.
Thank you, Ashford, and thank you, everyone. And we will have a great discussion today on preparing our youth for a better tomorrow. This is a discussion on virtual education, more importantly about the inequities that have been brought about due to COVID-19, the pandemic, and exacerbating what was already inequities in our education system before, but have been made much worse as we move forward. Today's conversation is an open dialogue to try to find solutions, but also to provide information to you as an audience in terms of knowing what resources are available and what can we do to make sure that we narrow that gap that unfortunately is in performance between students of color and those who are not of color. And hopefully today you'll learn a great deal from the experts we have on our panel. As I announce each panelist, I want you to just, if you don't mind, give us about 30 or 60 seconds to just introduce yourself and also to talk about your role as it relates to education and also the way in which you have worked to remedy the inequities that we see not only in the Tennessee education system, but also the national American education system. And I'm going to start first with the Honorable State Senator Raumesh Akbari, State Senator out of District 29. And Senator Akbari, how are you doing? And welcome to the panel and tell us who you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for doing this event. I'm really excited to kind of dive into this very timely discussion. My name is Raumesh Akbari. I represent District 29 in the Tennessee State Senate. District 29 is in Memphis, Tennessee. It includes downtown, South Memphis, Southwest Memphis, Cooper Young, all sorts of other places. So I serve as the second vice chair of the Education Committee in the Tennessee Senate. I am the only Democrat on the committee, so obviously sometimes I'm talking to myself, but it's very important for me as a member of the Tennessee Senate to always raise issues between the achievement gap, literacy, and really just ways that we can better prepare our students to tackle the needs of tomorrow.
Thank you, Senator. And next we have the Honorable Christiane Buggs, who's a board member in the Metro Nashville Public School System. Christiane, if you want to introduce yourself, and welcome to the panel.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me. Thank you all for hosting this. I am Christiane Buggs, a Nashville native. This is my second term. Well, I'm beginning my second term as a Metro Nashville Public Schools Board of Education member. I represent District 5, which is a bit of North Nashville, East Nashville, and a bit of South Nashville. Very much a gerrymandered district with over 40 schools, a majority of our low-income housing projects, but also some of our most expensive pieces of property in gentrified areas. I was a teacher at MNPS. I graduated from MNPS schools. And after teaching for a number of years, just wanted to offer my teacher voice. And the more that I've been down the rabbit hole of policy and understanding where resources flow and why, understanding advocacy, I've tried to make it my mission to update more policy that mandates equitable distribution of resources, or that mandates implicit bias identification. I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of the ways that I can insert myself, and so I'm actually hoping to learn from this panel as well. But I'm a founding member of the Equity Alliance, and just looking to build good policy.
Thank you. And next we have Dr. Fallon Wilson, CEO and founder of Black in Tech Nashville. Fallon, welcome to the panel and tell us who you are.
Thank you so much for having me. It is always a privilege to be on a panel with such amazing folks who are doing work for our communities locally and nationally. I wear two hats. Locally, I've served on various education committees and boards, from Pencil to working with Alignment Nashville, to being and founding the Women of Color for Education Equity, which is Black and Brown women advocating specifically for our children within our public school system. But I'm also wear a tech hat. So locally, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Black in Tech Nashville, but I also wear many hats nationally. I serve on the FCC advisory board for tech diversity and trying to figure out best policies to support the growth of marginalized but valuable communities nationally in the space of digital inclusion and access. I've served as the co-chair for Nashville Smart City Plan, and I spent a lot of time talking about data policy research and equity in this world. And so the intersections of remote learning, I know we're going to talk a lot about that, and virtual learning is where I spend most of my time now, discussing how to best support locally our children in metro public schools, but also nationally, what should we be thinking about pre-COVID, now COVID, and post-COVID. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Cordell Oren. He is the executive director of Stand for Children Tennessee, which is based in Memphis, Tennessee. And Cordell, if you tell us who you are, and welcome to the panel.
Yeah, thanks. I am Cordell Oren, native-born Memphian. Came back a lot of years ago now, so been back more years than I was away. At Stand for Children Tennessee, the executive director, and we do work around education advocacy and are growing that work as we recognize across the country the connection between the uprisings and focus on racial and social justice. So a lot of our work has been around education funding and trying to get more education funding for our children, both locally and at the state level, working towards policies and practices and programs within our school district and across our public schools, as traditional schools and charter schools. We work specifically with a set of 20 high schools here, working on 9th grade on track, making sure that 9th graders are on track to graduate, which makes them 3 to 4 times more likely to graduate. So looking at very specific programs and practices that we can put in place. And then also branching out and looking at the impact of breaking the school to prison pipeline as we think about the needs that we have both locally and across our state in youth justice, and as that expands out and impacting families in just pure justice work of making sure we have a just and equitable community.
Thank you, Cordell. And next we have Ashford Hughes, Executive Officer of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Metro Nashville Public Schools. Ashford, can't say welcome to the panel because you helped form this, but I guess I can't say welcome to the panel. And can you tell us who you are?
Absolutely. I am, as you said, the Executive Officer for DEI work in Metro Nashville Public Schools. I have actually been on the job for 2 months now. Really focused on how do I work with Dr. Wilson and Mrs. Buggs to create the policies, practices, and procedures that talk about equity and lead us to systematic changes. We are a great district. We are the 2nd largest school district in the state behind Shelby County. And we know that we have a lot of work to do, but now we feel within my role coming in, we have the opportunity to be intentional about the education system that we make and that we set forth going forward. I also serve other hats within the community, which is important to this conversation. I am the co-director of the My Brother's Keeper Nashville Network. We actually have our 20 under 20 program starting next week. I also am the former director of our local Benjamin L. Hooks, Prince Hall, Masonic Organization Mentoring Program here in Nashville. And I also serve as a member of our Sigma Beta Club mentorship as well. So young people, particularly young Black and brown boys, has been my focus for at least the last 10 years now. And I hope to take the mantra that I believe in, you know, all students are scholars, race, gender, socioeconomics should not factor in the quality of education that a person receives in our city or in our state. So looking forward to this conversation. Thank you, Brother Lovett.
Thank you. And our first question is going to be for Senator Akbari and Cordell Oren. We know that Shelby County Schools will be opening up tomorrow. And really, it's two questions, and either you can start it off. And the first is, how has the school district prepared for this hybrid virtual environment that they will endeavor into officially tomorrow? But more importantly, how prepared do you think the teachers, the parents, and the students are for what this new world will look like for them? And Senator Akbari, Cardell, please, you can start, either one can start, but those two questions are really important and what we want to start this discussion off with.
Cardell, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'm always going to follow behind you, Senator. Go ahead.
Well, I think that Shelby County Schools has been very deliberate with the decisions that they're making. Certainly, we are in a time that is completely unprecedented. There's no playbook. There's no guide. I know that the Department of Education on a state level has been releasing different toolkits and guidance weekly to help the LEAs, but it really has been something that's been locally decided. Now, Shelby County Schools decided to use a substantial amount of their CARES dollars that they receive directly from the federal government to purchase equipment and technology for students. So that includes devices and then also abilities to access the internet, particularly with a hotspot. They've been doing device distribution, I think, for the past 2 weeks. Initially, they were going to do you could decide if you wanted your child to be in the classroom or learn in a virtual environment. After the deadline to sign up for either one, the decision was made to learn in a virtual environment and to move the start date until August 31st, which is tomorrow. So I think they're trying the best that they can as far as trying to prepare their teachers and their students. I think the challenges are you have so many parents who have to work. So who's going to be the person to help guide that child through the experience? I've seen people jokingly put in other areas, post pictures of their children losing interest in trying to do something else because they feel like they're at home, but they really are in a virtual school environment of sorts. So I think it's going to be difficult on the teachers, the parents, and the students. My only consolation is hopefully this will not last always. I know that there's going to be some catch up that we will have to do, particularly looking at maybe next summer after hopefully we have some sort of vaccine or treatment plan in place where this is not something that's so deadly. But they're trying to make this work. So we'll see what happens.
I think what I would add is in saying, as Senator Akbari said, they've done a lot of work, especially as they move towards a virtual environment. I know the Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Burt, has done a great job at working hard over the extra month that they gave themselves, trying to prepare teachers to be prepared for virtual instruction. As many of you know, and I'm sure Dr. will speak on even more so, virtual instruction is a whole another game in terms of the engagement of students, of having our students, and their plan is to have students mainly in front of their computers from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., which is going to be a challenge for the teachers, for the students, for the families. And so we know within the environment that we have that there have been a lot of good things that have happened. I would also say that there are some gaps in terms of ways that we have looked holistically at this effort and issue, not just from our school level, but as we think about this as a community challenge. And some places have come to bear in the YMCA here has been very active at the end of last school year, over the summer, at serving children of essential workers, also helping to distribute food when the district had challenges. And that's one of the things that I think we need to see even more so across the community. The city of Memphis, for the first time in a long while, gave funding from the CARES Act funding to support the district in the devices and internet access that the district launched into, which I think has been one of the greatest things that has happened and the most challenging in terms of expansion of digital inclusion access for children. But that's just the first step of getting them the devices. Right now, they're using mobile hotspots for families that don't have internet access. And we know that that's probably not sustainable. And so it becomes a broader community issue that I'm sure we'll talk about. But just as Senator Akbari said, one of the biggest issues that we think, and we've asked the district about this even more recently, is how do we deal with families that need childcare? We don't have schools open right now, even for limited childcare. YMCA here is saying that they will service up to 10,000 students. We could guess that there were probably about, my estimates are about 50% of students who would have had to go back, either would have selected to go back or would have defaulted to going back to schools based on the district's plan, which is about 40,000 students potentially that might need support or might need to be in some kind of childcare facility or space. And families are trying to work that out on their own. We don't have the mechanism for that to be done in a coordinated way. So I think that that's one of the challenges. Also, when we think about our educators are also being told, you can't bring your children to school. Like, you have to figure out how to do your instruction while you're at home taking care of your kids. So at the very least, I think we should also be thinking about how do we support our educators who are also parents and making sure that they can take care of their own children before we're asking them to take care of ours. So I think that, those are all of the aspects that I think are mixed up in this and trying to solve, what is understood to be a challenge that, the more you dig into it, the further down the rabbit hole you go in terms of unanticipated consequences about what can happen. So I think that that's where we are in my perspective.
Great points, and we'll segue that into Memphis being prepared for tomorrow, and we'll go to Metro Nashville Public Schools, who are now 2 weeks into this new unknown. And for Christiane and Ashford, tell us how things are working. What are some of the bright spots? What are some things that need more work? And then also, what advice would you give to the Shelby County Schools group if they were to ask you for advice as to things to look out for to make sure that, especially when we talk about inequities, we can remedy those as quick as possible?
You said such a mouthful. These were such good questions. We are 2 weeks in. We have stumbled, but we knew we were going to stumble. So I think the one thing that I hang my hat on is that we are as transparent as we can be. We are very communicative. I mean, we send out, at one point we were sending out daily emails, call outs. I mean, just getting information out as best we could. We always understand though that in Nashville, with it being so large and it being, there being so many different types of disparities, 145 languages spoken, 162 schools, the limited budget that we receive. I mean, we knew that there were exacerbated inequities that a light was finally being shown on that we had been begging the city and the state to accommodate for. And that's not a shot at you, Senator Akbari, because I know we have a friend in you, but we're not, because Nashville sends so much money to the state, we don't get enough back to educate our students. So we knew these things going in. We tried to prepare students, families as best we could. And we focus more on well-being than anything else. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that we are just engaging families and calming them down, just letting them know, okay, look, I mean, I have a toddler here. I'm sorry if I seem distracted or disconnected. And so we've had to explain to families that we know that we can't jump into extremely rigorous content, because we've got to assess to understand where students were left off in March, to understand the effects of summer and now potentially COVID slide, to look at how we might advocate to the state to impact standards alignment, because all of our students are in different places right now. So, I mean, I think everyone on this panel would understand already that you're not going to please everyone. Our goal is to make sure that we're doing as right by students as we possibly can. So we're just focusing on safety and well-being. We are literally divvying up school lists to the paraprofessionals, to other staff in the building, to make sure that every child is getting a phone call, an email, even a home check-in, as unsafe as those can be. But we're literally putting our lives on the line to make sure we're supporting kids. There's so much that I could say, but I think that's a good start. Ashford, I know you've been in the thick of it, sir.
Yeah. I'll follow up with some of the challenges that we faced early on was connecting with all of our students. I know that earlier in the summer, we did a survey, but we found out, we didn't reach several thousand of our students. So then we had to kind of figure out a way, how do we get people safely, boots on the ground, connecting with community organizations to actually go and find these students. As Senator Akbari said, we utilized close to $27 million to make certain that our district was a one-to-one device to student ratio, but we knew that a lot of our students we hadn't talked to in some time. So how are we going to make certain that we got those devices to those students, which was vitally important if we want to have a successful virtual learning environment? Some of the other challenges that we face with how do we as educators, as administrators, as school board, how do we get together to plan for an uncharted territory when we can't be physically amongst each other? So Dr. Battle set forth for several of us to have meeting opportunities to really engage, look what was happening nationally, to put together a plan or a strategy, to contact our superintendents in other states and other cities in Tennessee to make certain that we were trying to get the best results moving forward. Some of the bright spots, I would say, on top of a challenge, we all saw that the first day that we tried to go virtual, you have close to 86,000 students, 11,000 employees trying to get online at one time. And we had some technical issues within the first 2 hours, right? As Dr. Battle said, we pressure tested our network and we had some issues. But again, we hope that that showcased to our other districts that, you know, you're going to have the same issues when you have a lot of people trying to get on at one point in time. But we have seen some bright spots amongst all of this. Some of our teachers, some of our families are being not only resilient, but trying to find different ways that they are connecting with each other during this time. I've seen firsthand that many of our administrators, many of our teachers are revamping what does it mean to do family engagement? What does it mean to give students amplified voice during this time? Because we need to know what's working for them and what's not working for them. The most important thing that we've been working on right now during this time is the social emotional learning of students. And Dr. Battle set out for the first 2 weeks to really, let's check in with students, particularly those that we know we weren't in touch with, not just the African-American students, but some of our English learning students, some of our exceptional education students. How are we checking up on their well-being? In Nashville, we had a tornado on top of COVID, on top of other storms. So there was a lot going on. So if I would have any advice to give to Memphis or to any other district that hasn't started yet in Tennessee, make certain that you have a robust plan for connecting with students. Make certain that you have a robust plan for connecting and getting information out to parents and families. And make certain that you are consistently testing your technology and your access to technology for students, family throughout the district as well.
Thank you. And Dr. Wilson, this question is coming your way. And just from your perspective, what have you seen in the digital and tech inclusion space across the nation that we need to consider in Tennessee? And as a follow-up to that, can you put it in the urban context of Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville, Memphis, and what's possible there as well?
I love when people ask me that question, because everyone expects that there's like a magic bullet moment and that I'm going to give you the most perfect answer that's going to solve the digital inclusion issues you're having in your city. To be quite honest, if I'm thinking about it from a pandemic perspective, everyone is in trial and experiment moment, right? Everyone is trying to pilot. Do we do remote learning? Is it hybrid? How do we lease devices to students, or do we give devices to students? And so everyone, underneath the lens of a pandemic, everyone is trying to figure out. So I don't know if there's a best practice yet for how to do that. But are there some signs of being able to do it more effectively in cities? Yes. Some cities who already have a commitment to digital inclusion, not just talking about digital inclusion and technology, but digital inclusion and equity in general. They have an officer like Ashford Hughes before we got rid of that position at the mayor's office, right? And so they have equity officers, they have reports and benchmarks, and as a part of their strategic plan. And so they're probably going to fare far better than cities like a Nashville, and I will talk deeply about my city today, when it comes to really solving these challenges that we're having at the school district level. I think the question is always hard for me to answer because everyone wants me to tell them that there's some city that is doing it well, but to be quite honest, there isn't. And there are cities, once again, that may have an equity officer, they may have a strategic plan around inclusion and equity in technology, but it's not actionable. There's no funding behind it. There's no commitment from tech companies or from foundations to make sure that they're meeting those benchmarks that they set out. And I know that sounds like a doom and gloom moment, but it's reality. And I think if we're going to push forward post-COVID and really assess the damage that COVID and also years of underfunding public education, and no offense to the senator because she's our, a champion, but we know there are others that we have to kick around, that we cannot expect for there to be a perfect model for public schools at this moment. Now the question is, are the private schools doing well? How are they doing? Oh, they're doing exponentially. They're doing well. They have in-person school here in Nashville. They have not had any COVID cases that we know of. Why? Because they have expansive spaces where they can spread students out. They have additional resources to deal with any type of, if there's any type of infection rate, they have resources and opportunities, right? And so their children are not going to have summer slide. They're not going to have to think about a homework gap, because their kids have access and resources. And so the issue for me when I think about which city is doing well, it is those cities, once again, that have the equity officers, the plans, but also those who have a commitment to funding public education. I mean, it ain't rocket science here. It's not, I don't have to give you a magic pill for this. It really is fund them, give them more resources so that so Christian and others can take time out and not have to build the plane and fly it and spend time thinking through how can we have a hybrid model that ensures that our most marginal kids get access. They couldn't do that because they're having to figure out how to feed the children, how to make sure the parents are able to go to work. It is so many different things that they have to figure out, and they don't have the resources to do it. And then you put a pandemic on top of that, and then you say, well, hey, we gave you CARES Act dollars. You all got computers and internet. And I have so many, I hope we get to talk about that because I have so many thoughts about that. And then we expect that everything is going to be fine and there's models. No, there are no models because we have failed our children and we continue to fail them in this pandemic. I'm sorry, Kenyatta, it's a hard moment for me because we have not done right. And now it's showing itself in a deep crisis moment.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. And that's a good segue. I got a question for Senator Akbari, but I want the entire panel to chime in after you respond, Senator Akbari. We know that in the education system nationally and as a state, there are a lot of things we had to work on pre-COVID-19. Now we have a new basket of variables, and to be quite honest, some challenges that we didn't even know existed right before our eyes. What are the critical changes we must make, as a state, to really improve the future of education effectively, and especially from the perspective of equity gaps?
Well, I think this will probably be a recurring theme, is that there has to be additional funding to make all of these programs that we talk about happen. Our children, and I think that schools, have visited a couple of schools in Seattle, and they've taken this complete, comprehensive, holistic approach, literally from the cradle all the way through the 12th grade. And they provide additional resources, not just in the classroom, but also for the family and for the parents. So there's some things that we've done on a very small level. When I was working with the school, when I first got elected, it was discovered that most of the parents were young parents, but also they had not graduated from high school or had a GED. So in our own small way, we tried to offer, or at least connect them with GED training. However, if we had some sort of community school environment where not only are the needs of the child being met, but it's a place where the family can get continuing education, they can have job training, they can actually help get them a job, build a career, all sorts of things like that. I think that's a big deal. I think we also have to look at how we treat education in general. What are we educating our kids for, right? And I'm really talking about once they get to high school. There are so many different opportunities in changing, and I know Dr. Wilson can talk more about this, but changing technologies, where are we educating our kids for a workforce of yesterday or tomorrow? Because doing today is still not sufficient. I think that pipeline programs similar to what they have at Meharry is a really neat thing. I mean, I know that it's something they just started, but connecting kids saying, hey, you want to be a doctor? Well, this is what we're building, a pipeline to medical school. I mean, in starting in elementary school, that's a big deal. I will say like Dr. Wilson said, this pandemic immediately clarified the differences between schools that have and schools that don't. Schools that did not have a lot of their transition, it was just an early summer. It was very difficult for the kids to be able to learn, or even, and what I mean by that is the infrastructure was not in place for teaching in a digital world. Whereas in most of our private schools and a lot of our charter schools, which are public schools, they were set up where they had devices and they could easily transition. So if we're going to really change education and close these opportunity and achievement gaps, we have to have some equity in funding. And we even have to look at even beyond, it's not just about giving equal funding, it's about giving even more funding so that there can be equity in outcomes. So that's where I'm at. It's all about the dollars. But unfortunately, as everyone has alluded to, we do serve in a General Assembly where people are just not interested in funding education more extensively. As a matter of fact, what they will say is school is already fully funded, which is completely and utterly untrue. And if school is completely funded based on our formula, we need a new formula, clearly. So.
Anyone else want to comment on that? And thank you, Senator.
I want to piggyback on that. I definitely believe everything our senator said. I also want to talk about when we look at education, particularly within Middle Tennessee, we put so much on our schools to solve. We want the schools to feed the students every meal, plus when they're not in school. We also want to focus on housing for students. We also want to focus on clothing the students. We ask teachers to do so much. We ask the district to do so much, when this needs to be a holistic approach from our leaders from all across our counties. This has to be from the top levels of government, from school to our business community, to our nonprofit community, to our boards of education, to our elected officials, to sit down and talk about how do we create a community of education. Right now, we don't believe, or I don't believe when we talk about equity, that's really taking place. And I think one of the first things that I'm doing within my role is to define what equity means within MNPS. Oftentimes when we talk about equity, we're talking about equality. That's what shows up when the implementation comes to bear. But we really are talking about meeting students directly where their needs are. And oftentimes some of our students in our communities need more because everyone is not starting at the same place in the race. And that is vitally important. But we can no longer continue just to say, schools, we want you to do everything, and then wonder why when we say that we don't have enough funding to do that, that we don't get the outcomes that we hope to achieve. So I'm trying to make certain to work with Christian Buggs, to work with Senator Akbari, to make certain that we not only have the funding, but we have the table set where family, community organizations like the one that are hosting this event today are at the table firmly creating solutions to some of these education issues that we face. One of the number one equity issues that I see we face is literacy. But no one talks about that often. I feel education, just as often as we are in the streets right now marching against police brutality, rightfully so, we need to be in the same type of energy towards education and towards reading for our young people. That access to reading, literacy opens up a range of opportunity unlike anything before. Malcolm X once stated that the power within a book and reading within a book opens up doors. It explores how we communicate with each other. It keeps our economic system thriving because we have people that are involved with everything that needs to happen. We must take a more holistic approach to education so that schools aren't the end all be all to everything.
Okay,
Teachers should be teaching students how to read, write, and do math, not everything else that we have asked teachers and principals to do right now.
Give me a minute and we'll get some.
Thank you, Ashford. And this next question is for Cardell and also for Christiane Buggs.
I was gonna no response. Okay, got you.
No, please go ahead. Sorry, I'm so sorry.
I just wanted to say, Ashford, to your point, you're right. We do need to set the table. But what my experience has been in Nashville is that people like when the CARES Act dollars, let's talk about money, because it really is about money. This whole conversation is going to be centered around money. For the last 4 or 5 years, and Cordell, you too, because you've done the work in the technology space in addition to Stand Up for Children, right? Trying to get city leaders, nonprofits, private companies, and government and community-based organizations to think about technology and inclusion and broadband access has been a fight, right? Primarily because they didn't see the need for it. They wanted to put money into arenas and to all types of things instead of thinking about the full infrastructure and what we would need to really have a smart city in Nashville. And I would venture to say even a smart city in Memphis, correct? The thing, when the CARES Act dollars came, everybody's eyes got big. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, let's solve the digital inclusion issue. Let's come around the table. So there was a table created. It was a table created by the mayor's office here, who had very specific people he asked. Mind you, as someone who works with all of our ISPs, our internet service providers, right, you would assume that all of them would be at the table, because I don't understand how you have AT&T and not have Google Fiber. I mean, it's just like a big tent type of moment. But the issue became everybody on that committee, or everybody who had an institution in Nashville, they thought they had the magic bullet to solve the issue of inclusion for remote learning. No one wanted to work together. I'm saying this as someone who tried to pull people together, right? No one wanted to work together. So to me, it's never an issue of intellect. And I knew that the issues, as a Christian could speak to this, would not necessarily be finding the devices for our children here in Nashville. It really was more about getting grown-ups to really work together, right? And to see that Black and brown children were valuable. Because what I've heard so far, Cordell, is that, oh my gosh, Fallon, we have solved the digital divide. We have laid the playing fields with the CARES Act dollars, because now every child has a device and internet. Isn't that amazing? Their lives are way better now. I said, oh my God, do non-people of color really think this way, right? That I have to die. So many of our people who are Black and brown who are more likely to get COVID have to die so that our kids can get access to a computer and to internet. How faulty is that reasoning? So what I'm saying to you is, I think we have tried the big tent. We have created the table, but people don't want to work well together, number one. And number two, they don't want to see how valuable our Black and brown children are to give them what they truly need. They want to give them what they think they need. And what they think they need are devices that they're leasing, which I have so many issues with that for Shelby County and also for Metro Public Schools. Because who's going to figure out the budget moving forward for that when you have to refurbish them? Who's going to track them to make sure that they're up to date? Why do the parents, are they able to even freely look online for jobs? Or is Big Brother, i.e. the government, i.e. our school districts, telling them what they can and cannot do? So what I'm saying is, to really solve this issue of equity and this issue of digital equity, yes, it requires everybody at the table, but people have to let go of their egos, their prejudices against Black and brown poor people, and also have to recognize that this is a long-term investment strategy, which nobody's thinking about that next year. And how Christian and them gonna have to make up that budget to deal with how many devices? 80,000 devices. Sorry, I hear you though. But I am jaded. Go ahead, Kenyatta. I'm taking over your thing. Forgive me.
No worries, and thanks for responding. And this next question is for Cordell and also for Christiane Buggs, and it's start a conversation for the entire group as well. But either one can answer first. But how do you distinguish between equity and equality in the classroom? And it's really for the audience, because I think while we talk about it, it's really more inside baseball. The average household has no clue that there are efforts to try to even things out or make things better. But how do you distinguish between the two in the classroom, and what should the audience know about equity and equality?
Christiane, you want to go first?
I sure can. There's so many thoughts, so many different thoughts. I'll take you back to 3 years ago when our very first African-American superintendent was looking to shift to an equity model to provide resources to our students. And so at one point we had a Title I threshold of 50%. So if 50% of the students in your school qualify for Title I, then the school got Title I dollars. Well, we realized that there was a large gap, that our neediest schools, many of them were, the entire community was under-resourced. So that meant that students, where 30% of our students are coming in the kindergarten behind grade level, in our neediest communities or neediest clusters, more like 40 to 50% were coming into kindergarten under-resourced. What does that look like for the life of a student if at kindergarten, at 5 years old, they're already a full grade level behind? Yes, darling. Yes, baby. Okay. So many thoughts, man. It's interesting to have a toddler while I go through this transition, or while I'm learning to be a board member, because I'm able to really do some comparisons, not in a negative way, but it's making it more personal. Even though I was a teacher, I have 8 brothers and sisters that came through MPS schools. Having your own child and having to prepare them for a school system that will likely be under-resourced is just interesting. And so, Cardell, if you don't mind, could you tap in, because I need to tap out for 30 seconds and I'll tap back in to finish my
Yes,
response.
ma'am. I got you. So I think what Christiane started saying was that so much, and like Fallon said, so much has been around, or maybe it was Ashford said, I think Ashford said, how so much has been around when we manifest what we think about as equity, it ends up being equality, where we think we have to give the same resources that everybody gets to the same places, rather than giving the needed resources to the places where the resources are most needed, and in the way that they can be received and consumed or applied to the needs that people have. We can see this on a state level. I mean, both our districts now have some level of kind of school-based or student-based budgeting. So part of that implementation has been moving from more of a staffing model, which is you got this many students, you get a principal, you get this many staff teachers, you get this many librarians, you get this many literacy people, an equal model of applying resources to schools to, well, this school has this many students who are economically disadvantaged, and this many students who are English learners, and this many students who are special needs or exceptional children. And so we are going to give those schools an additional amount of money than other schools that don't have the number of students with the additional needs that these other schools have. And so that's one implementation. I think both of our districts have varying levels of applicability of whether students are impoverished or in other ways of how we apply that formula, and imperfect to some degree to actually addressing the needs. But if you extrapolate that up to the state level, the state basically does the same thing and says, well, because you got this number of children, we'll give you this amount of funding for your district. And there's a small piece, and it gets graded, okay, there's a small piece around economically disadvantaged, but we have a funding formula, as has been mentioned earlier by Raumesh, that needs to really be looked at, because it's not taking into account real equity. If we look at the history of that, we know that rural school districts across Tennessee have had 3 different lawsuits to change the state funding formula so that it addresses the needs that they specifically have. Over all of those years, 30, 40, probably almost 50 years of having a funding formula in place, we now have our first lawsuit from our urban districts, both Nashville and Shelby County, which are challenging the state in terms of the adequacy and equity of the funding that's given to our school districts. And so both from a very micro level of how we apply the funding that we receive and have to our schools, and even on that side, we can think about, Nashville has a consolidated government, has a metro government. Here, we see more discrepancy because our county funding gets divided equally between our majority kind of urban African-American majority district and the other municipal districts. So on our county funding level, all of the students get the same amount from our county, whether they are in Memphis, in the lowest zip code, in the highest poverty zip code in the country, to the Collierville, which is probably, besides Williamson, the highest wealth city in our whole state. And they get the same amount of funding on our county level. And then if you take that up, they're getting some benefit from being associated with the county based on our state funding formula that looks at the demographics of the county, not of the district. So there are various ways that our funding formulas need to be changed. And those also kind of apply and show us how we're getting to thinking about equal resources when we really need to be moving to equitable resources.
And now that I have a little person that is settled in, I can tap back in. But I think you covered a lot of it, Cardell. You covered a whole lot of it. So I would give this example to families or community members. And my parents divorced when I was young, right? But they both remarried. I ended up with 8 younger brothers and sisters. None of us are the same. So what my mom did to me, if she tapped my bottom, she might not have really needed to tap Matthew's bottom. She may have just needed to shame him. If she shamed my brother Matthew, she may have needed to take something away from my sister Terry. That was a more equitable way to raise us. It was addressing our individual needs. And I think when we try to talk about dollar per dollar or providing the exact same supports for every student, no matter what it is that they truly need, then we've missed the mark. And we've provided equal access, but not nearly the equitable type of access that we needed. And like I said earlier, 30% of our students come into kindergarten a full grade level behind. That means that this is a community level issue that we have not addressed. But we know that it's the haves that don't seem to understand that. And the point I was trying to make earlier when when our first Black director was in the school system, he was looking to shift that funding formula. Our neediest schools just needed more dollars. So if at 50% you got, $800 per student, at 75%, you would have been getting more like $1,000 per student. And that still would not have addressed all the needs, but it would have more equitably addressed them. It would have shifted more dollars to our schools. But what we also don't talk about in that equity, equality conversation is equity of advocacy. And I think we as elected officials have got to do a better job of understanding not just the needs of our individual districts, but of all the students that we impact. Then I would ask the community at large to better understand who it is you put in office and how you hold us accountable. What I don't need is you thinking that I'm affiliated with something and so you don't want to support me. You don't want to get to know me. And here I am, the best thing smoking for your district. After I've been elected, I need you coming out. I need to hear your voice. I need to understand what it is that you need, because you are going to be the best advocate for your child. I may be the best support at school for them as an educator, but you are their road dog. You are their advocate. And if we can work together to make sure that we've elevated conversations so that we are no longer just talking to the haves, but we're talking to those who have a diverse set of needs, we'll be forced to engage in equitable conversations. We'll be forced to distribute resources more equitably. But until then, we'll continue to think that equal is okay.
Ashford, Dr. Wilson, Senator, any comments on the equity, equality conversation?
Well, I'll say one thing real quick. It's just so disappointing what happened with Dr. Joseph when he tried to make those types of moves, and really speaks to the ultra-liberal woke population that is only ultra-liberal and woke when it's not directly impacting what they perceive as their own bottom line or school or community. So until we actually are doing things that are beyond performative and actually writing checks and allocating funds in a way that will make a difference, then we're not going to get as far as we need to get, period.
And I'm gonna piggyback off of some of that, and maybe this is the wrong word, but I know when we talk about the equity component, we have to have courageous conversations within our cities about race, around social economics. As students are coming back into the classroom, they have experienced a lot. Many of our students at MNPS were leading. 5 young women led the largest march, and they were all MNPS students in Davidson County. They're coming back with questions. They don't want to accept the status quo anymore. They want to have these conversations about race, about social economics. So we have to prepare teachers to have the professional development to have these conversations. We have to prepare the principals, family members to all have these conversations, because our students are expecting a new norm. They're expecting to create a new construct about what educating them looks like. And I think that's where we have to step in to share the agency with parents, with students, to create the type of learning environment that is going to help them to achieve all of their outcomes. And I believe that's where Dr. Battle has brought me in to specifically address that. But, you know, Dr. Wilson, a friend of mine, Kia Jarman, they will tell you one person coming in to head a department is not alone going to create the equity needed. It is going to take a overall holistic approach to do that, but it has to be done with intentionality. And that's a word that I'm gonna be using along my continuum of work, intentionality, to have these conversations, to create a equity framework, to create a policy that will last over time, that looks to making certain our students would not be shackled by their zip code determining their quality of education or outcomes and success that they achieve. But it can be done. And now is the time, as as our late congressman stated, to get into a little good trouble, to do the things necessary to make the changes in front of us.
Can I add something if you do?
Absolutely. We're good with that.
Thank you. So I would say, I'm going to take us up a notch and say something that seems to be a bit salacious. We don't really address classism when we talk about racism. So everyone in Nashville knows, and they keep trying to talk me out of it, I am committing to sending my son, as rambunctious as he is, to his neighborhood school. His school that's in a gentrifying neighborhood, meaning that all the black kids are at one school and all the non-black kids are at the other. And I think we just don't talk about that. We don't talk about making each other feel comfortable sending our kids to school with other black kids. I posed the question in one of my friend groups that if we're going to continue to protest and suggest that Black Lives Matter, can we make sure that we're advocating for all of our black babies also? Why do we continue to self-segregate? Why do we continue to think that anything that is black or that is full of black people must not be upper echelon? And so that's something that I think that's going to be the next level of conversation, making sure that we don't continue to forget students that don't have a strong advocate, making sure that we do our part and put our money where our mouth is. And I mean, the most expensive thing the most expensive thing in my life is my son. I mean, he is something that is priceless to me. And so I'm paying with his education. I'm going to uplift whatever schools he goes to make sure that they get the resources that they need. Because if I continue to just be a concerned community member on the side, there's always going to be someone telling me that I don't know what's best for that school. But if my son is in that school, as under-resourced as it is, I can elevate every conversation.
And Ashford, I hope you don't. Oh, sorry. Yes, absolutely. I concur, Dr. Wilson. And Ashford, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to take creative license here for the next to the last question for every one of you on the panel. And probably to my own peril, I like to look at things 5 years out and start panicking about them now. 5 years from now, on the path that we are on in our education system in the state or even in your city, what concerns you the most, and what are you worried about 5 years from now that if we don't fix it, we've got a really, really big problem, bigger than what we had already before COVID-19? Anyone can start, or I'll pick a name, but I just want to see what would the audience need to learn from, and how should they be a little bit more concerned and have a little bit more sense of urgency about what we need to work on, knowing 5 years from now, this may happen if we don't make a serious change?
Well, for me, it is the number of African Americans who will not have jobs because of automation. Right now, we forecast that in our southern rural counties, that at least 40% of those jobs will no longer be here, right? And so that's a concern. The concern is also that 46% of those same counties don't have access to the internet. And if I'm using them as like a measure for like Black America in general, I worry about how do you feed yourselves when things are automated, and no longer are we outsourcing. Now we have AI, and now we have 5th generation technology, which allows us to do a lot of amazing, cool, innovative types of technologies. But now companies can accelerate the, letting people go, because now they can teach machines to do jobs. And so when you ask me, what are you worried about in the next 5 years? And if this remote learning process of COVID is not telling us anything at this moment, is that we really have to figure out this digital inclusion equity issue immediately. I can't have conversations with our community about artificial intelligence because I can't have conversations about having quality and high-speed internet in their homes. Yes, they have the hotspots now, and I know Memphis is doing it, and so is Nashville, but that's not sustainable. And you have 4 devices in one home, and you have a low quality hotspot, and then you have a website that takes a certain level to load. The idea that they'll be able to do their work, do their homework, remain safe from COVID, accelerate, learn coding, and then have upward mobility, that is not going to happen. And so I feel like I'm the doom and gloom on here today, and I'm sorry, I'm usually more optimistic. Those who know me, I have energy for days, but I am terrified of what the tech future looks like. It is not just a tech bad thing for me. It is really how we're going to live our lives. It is how government is going to make decisions with big data. It is about how we have access to jobs and skills. It is about data and tracking and surveillance. But I can't have those conversations, even though other communities are having those conversations, and other communities are preparing for the workforce, and other communities are being able to co-create tech startups and address generational wealth. Other communities are having these things, but we can't. And so the solution, and I don't know if you asked me for a solution, but I'm gonna give you one, is really there are some bills in Congress, y'all. My Senator Akbari, I know your future is bright, so I'm just gonna throw all my little dreams onto you. There are some bills at the federal level that we should be pushing, like the Digital Equity Act. Senator Mary is not gone out of committee, but it's really holding accountable federal funding to states to really come up with a digital inclusion equity framework and strategic plan for their states, Ashford, if they're going to get any types of resources along those lines, right? And then the work that Barbara Lee is doing with computer science and making that a national norm and not just left up to a legislature to choose because they don't know the difference between CTE and computer science. Am I right, Cordell? They don't know the difference between career technical education and computer science, and they think it is the same thing. Talk to me later about that. But all that to say, there are just we need structural change, and we need federal policies to come hard on this. If not, y'all leave it to us who are already stretched thin, who are already doing a lot. This is where I disagree. I think Black people are always doing the work for our communities. I disagree with everybody else who I will argue against that. People are feeding the homeless. People are taking in other people's children. People are figuring out how to do it on what they have. But that is not enough to get us to compete with what the world is being created as relates to jobs and skill sets and access. And if the pandemic is here to stay, and there's not a unilateral vaccine, and Black folks are afraid to get the vaccine first, and I understand why, because I'm gonna be in that group too. But I'm gonna get it, Senator. I'm gonna get it eventually. We have to figure out really the technical pieces of all of this and the resources to ensure that we have sustainable, high quality internet, and also to think about how to get the state and the federal government to put more dollars here for Black and brown communities, because we're all struggling right now.
Anyone else?
Runway, so
5 years from now.
Yeah, you laid the runway, Dr. Wilson, so I'm gonna take the alley-oop. Budget. I mean, we have been shouting from the rooftops in Nashville that we needed more funding, and you had everyone saying that we were too top heavy in central office. Lo and behold, now we need all those thought partners. We needed those checks in for supports and for fidelity measures. We needed those extra people to just think and do the work so that we don't continue to be stretched thin. And so I'm just going to continue to echo that for forever, because I think if we don't make more intentional, thoughtful, equitable decisions about resources and about how we support our youngest citizens early in life, then we'll never get it right. I just so happen to, my full-time job, I'm a project manager of literacy partnerships with United Way here in Nashville, and we're managing a citywide literacy collaborative that takes the great things that are happening with My Brother's Keeper, and takes what's happening at the district, that takes what's happening with our public education foundation, that takes what's happening with different nonprofit groups, and it tries to keep us from working in silos. It tries to force us to pool resources and to use data, and even that's not doing enough yet, because there are so many gaps, because for so long our students have never received the type of supports they needed in the community. So when they get to our school, the 70% of them that might not be on grade level, when they finally do get to us, we still are not prepared to meet the foundational needs. So budget. If we don't if we don't have an increased budget, I wish we could have said this 5 years ago, that hey, if CMA Fest doesn't happen, Tennessee is going to collapse. Nashville is going to have to, need another revenue stream. If a tornado hits our downtown area, then what happens to the revenue that we once thought we were going to have that could actually go out and support some of the rural counties on top of supporting us? I wish we would have had that conversation 5 years ago. So I think we need to have it now, so that 5 years from now, we can say, well, we finally at least started to turn the corner. We still have millions and billions more that we need to invest in our communities, but at least we started having the conversation.
Can I just say what they both said, for sure. Also, I think to Dr. Wilson's point about artificial intelligence in this second or third machine age that we're approaching, we're going to have to figure some things out. And I'm a part of a fellowship that's actually based in Germany, but for COVID, now it's based on Zoom. But it really looks at American and European policies around AI, and to see really how much further Europe has gotten there, especially when it comes to their post-secondary education and having pathways to some sort of, I don't want to say technical career, because that's minimizing it too much, but a career that prepares you to deal with the technology that is today and perhaps into the future. And that's a fundamental shift. If we don't make that shift, just like Dr. Wilson said, you will have these low-level, labor-intensive, low education jobs that will disappear and will completely devastate communities from I think in a way that we can't fully comprehend, quite frankly. So for me, that's a big part of it, starting really from pre-K all the way through 12th grade. We have a piece of legislation that I worked with Code Crew on. They did a phenomenal job in Seeding for Success that really tries to push this this idea that we need to incorporate computer technology, computer education. And I know, Dr. Wilson, I'm butchering these terms, so I'm sorry. I'm a lawyer, not I'm not an expert, but we're trying to at least, schools need to look at things differently, and their curriculum needs to look at it differently. And that's what we're trying to push. So initially we had to go for a study. Once we have the study, then we'll push for actual comprehensive change in the education. And also, while I'm at it, Kenyatta, Dr. Lovett, I would be fascinated to hear your answer on this, given your expertise in the position that you're in. But I'm not the moderator, so I'm going to be quiet.
I will go after Ashford and Cardell, and you knew I wanted to answer that question too. Why would I ask it, right?
And I asked, jump in real quick. When I'm thinking 5 years, what worries me is that we would not have done what's necessary to curb the literacy gap that we see within our students. I continue to champion literacy as here within our district. I think roughly, and correct me where I'm wrong, Christian, only close to 30%, a third of our students are at reading level by third grade. And if you're at reading level, that doesn't mean like you are advanced, like you are just the bare minimum, right? So I teach my son, he's in the second grade right now. We read every day. We read multiple books when he wakes up and when he goes to bed, because I understand the importance of literacy and reading to critical thinking skills. We have to have the resources. We have to provide the teachers with the advanced pedagogy, the curriculum, so that students enjoy reading because they see themselves in the curriculum. That is vitally, vitally important. And that's not just me talking, that's in historic data. And I think it's vitally important that we take up arms within our community to champion literacy at a level unprecedented. That is vitally important. I'm also concerned when we look at the larger city construct of housing trends. As we know that many of our cities, our schools are becoming resegregated, it is because of housing trends. There was a book written years ago in '97, and there's a revised version, why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? And it talked about those housing trends were part of the problem with the resegregating of schools. When we look at what our state legislature has done here to turn down some of Nashville's past policies around inclusionary housing, that's problematic. And that's why, again, when we talk about voting and connecting those kitchen table issues to the impact of voting, why we need to make certain, as Christian said earlier, we're getting people out to the polls to vote because they support or they don't support these type of policies that can enhance or curtail education within our communities. I'm a firm believer in hope, right? John Lewis led hope. President Obama led with hope. So I want in my role to lead with hope that we can get there, that these issues are vitally important, but it's going to take a systematic approach. It's going to take an all hands on deck approach, and it's going to take us moving beyond the comfort of where we are now, the comfort of our positions, to really go into these places and champion equity, to champion literacy, to champion moving forward for Black and brown students, for English learning students, for exceptional education students. But it has to happen now. We need to do this now, and we can no longer wait until tomorrow and the perfect timing, because that perfect timing will never be here.
Yeah, if to just add on to what everybody has said, such great stuff. I think that it's the fear is if we don't learn our lessons. So we've learned a lot of lessons, and a lot of things have been laid bare by the COVID pandemic, by the clarity from all of the challenges of police shootings and police violence across the country, for a racial pandemic. And so there are a lot of things that we found out over this time, over having 45 as president on a federal level. We have seen a lot of things about our society laid bare and our communities laid bare that were always under the surface, but that it has been hard to ignore because of these pandemics and how it's brought it to the fore. As we think about going into 5 years, the same way as the last Great Recession took us 5 years, I'd say for Memphis, it probably took closer to 10 years to recover from the recession. We will see over 4 to 5 years probably to recover from COVID from an educational standpoint. So this is not just a point in time, like we get back to school and now things are fine. Children will, as much as we want them to learn and our focus is on them learning, from our districts and the great work that our educators are doing, they will be impacted by this. I think, as Ashford said, by the traumas that they've experienced over this time, both from COVID and our racial justice challenges that we've seen, that it will take time to get things back up to bear. But that also creates opportunity. So it creates opportunity, one, because of things that we've learned that we could do that we didn't think that we could do a year ago. We didn't think that we could do a one-to-one district. When our Superintendent Ray, came into superintendency wanting to do a one-to-one district, and to me, having tried to do that or talked about it 15 years ago at a college here, I thought, oh, that's 2 to 3 years to even think about doing that, to get the funding, to get it in place, to distribute. We've done it in less than 6 months, or it's happening in less than 6 months. And to Fallon's point, there is still a question of sustainability. So they've got a 4-year lease for this. They don't know exactly how to pay for all of this next year. And we really don't know how to pay for all of the internet access going into next year, unless we think about it more broadly on a community level, on a state level, on a federal level, of this is an important thing that everybody deserves the right to have access to. And so these are the lessons, the silos that we've seen that have been laid bare of the connection between people's health and their ability to work and their ability to have housing, to Esther's point, and their ability to have healthcare, and their ability to have justice, to have social justice and access to careers and to things that they can do that they don't have to report for. So all of these things are things that we've seen much more clearly over the last several months. And if we don't learn our lessons from them, if we get past this pandemic, if we get a new president, if we get all of these things that we say, well, if we could just get past this, and then we don't think, okay, here's what we know we were able to do from being able to distribute devices to every child in our communities, to, for us, reducing the amount of young people who are detained currently. It went from 90 down to 30 when they said they couldn't get the number down. So if we can't learn our lessons that these are things that we can do and still survive and still thrive and have a better community afterwards, these are the things that should concern us. And to the point of how that connects into the workforce, I would say, or I would guess that because of this, the automation that we knew was coming may have accelerated as companies have said, oh, we got to deal with what's happening now, and we got to do risk management for what could happen in the future so this doesn't catch us by surprise. So let's automate even quicker than we were planning on it. So if we don't, again, learn that lesson that people need to be able to shift and move, people need to be able to do work and gain income that doesn't necessarily require them to be in a complete service industry, to be in person everywhere, to have opportunities to shift the work that they do. If something like this happens in the future, this again is a lesson that we won't learn. So my fear is that we won't learn our lessons, that we have so many lessons to learn, that we've had so many things that we've identified that we could do, that we never thought that we could do, that we just have to push, the pedal to the metal and move that forward as a community with a focus on equity and making sure that everybody in our community gets the advantages and the ability and opportunities to do that.
Can I say one quick thing, Kenyatta, before you jump in? Because I just want to say that technology should be a human right. I mean, when we think about the human rights framework, at this moment, technology is going to shift how you live, how you make decisions, how your family get access, how you have jobs. It should be a human right, and we should see it as such. And the other thing we have to call out, it is not necessarily the we of us, Cardell, that we're having the challenge or that we won't learn the solution. It is white supremacy. I think we have to call it out, right? It is a lack of imagination on seeing how Black people or brown people deserve every right that they have, right? You're right. We've been talking about the digital divide for the last decades and decades on in, and in the matter of 3 months, on the head of the notion of us losing our bodies because of COVID, now we have one-to-one districts, right? Same thing when it comes to incarceration rates. Oh, now we're going to not criminalize marijuana because now we see it as an opportunity to make resources. We have always had the ability to do the change immediately, but it is white supremacy that keeps us from doing it. It is not us, it is them. It is how they conceive of our freedom. I'm sorry, it has never been us. It's always been their thought and them hoarding all of the resources and saying that you can only do this. And you know this, Cordell, from doing all the technology work. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was about, oh my gosh, we don't have to give laptops and computers to Black and brown people. They have their phones. But we also know that the functionality of a phone versus the functionality of a laptop and the types of skill sets you can get for the workforce, Kenyatta, because I'm about to turn it back over to you, is not the same. But it is how they think. They have such little dreams for us. And I think we have to understand that it's never been a resource issue. It is how they think about us and what they want to give us and what we allow them to give us. I'm done.
All right. And I'll be very brief, Senator. You allowed me to come in to speak on this. And I will say, in the words of Fred Sanford, I think this one is the big one. And my big concern is that the lost learning is not a module or a semester. We will have, at the very worst case scenario, multiple years of lost learning, which means greater limits in their ability to have economic mobility and a quality of life, because many of our individuals will not be employable because of this moment. And I hope, but I have my concerns that we have the courage or the sense of responsibility to come back and replenish what has been lost during this time. I think we'll just try to move forward. Those that can get along, fine. Those that don't, I'm not sure what we're going to do. So on the public side, I do know, and as you know, Senator, the worst case scenario in politics is when you have surplus or when you have deficits. And I think these deficits that are going to come around are going to make politics really nasty. And those who have the power are going to be able to get the scarce resources, and those who don't will be even further behind. And exactly as everyone would imagine, on my perspective and what I've heard from employers, automation is going to speed up considerably. It already is. To give you an example, car companies by year 2026 were already planning to make their last combustible engine. So you can imagine with lost learning, loss of opportunities for higher education and training and skills, we will have a lot of our brothers and sisters will have very limited options of how they will live and how they will work and how they will survive. So I hope that we have the courage and a sense of responsibility, but I question it. So we'll wrap up with the last point of what do you want everyone to know? What can they do? 90 seconds, no more than 90 seconds. And we're going to start with you, Ashford, and then I'm coming to you next, Cardell.
And I think one of the first things that we ask people to do within Nashville, Davidson County is go to www.mnps.org/family portal. We have a plethora of information for families to log in, to find how they can be supporting their students during this time, the school calendar, a lot of information. But we need community support right now for our students. Dr. Battle has made it apparent that she wants to make certain that every week we contact every student to check on not only how they're doing in school, but their well-being. We have set criteria where we are going to make this work, and we are going to do everything we can to revamp and reimagine what education looks like going forward. We're going to reimagine what it looks like to do family engagement, to give students amplified voice in the type of education that they want to receive. That's vital. But we also know that we are not going back. Technology is here to stay. We need to revamp and consistently look forward to how we are applying technology, not only in schools, but our entire community. That is going to be vitally important as we meet this now, this tech revolution that's taking place right now that has been in process. We need our communities to be engaged, to show up, to talk to individuals like myself, Christian Buggs, Senator Akbari, to make certain that they are staying abreast of what's going on with their students. We need the community engaged, and we need the community to call us out and to keep us accountable. And we also want to make certain that we are meeting students where they are. Connect with us because I am going to make certain that I push forward an equity platform and an equity policy that lasts beyond my time here, that lasts beyond our time on this panel. But we can and make this happen if we're intentional. In Nashville, come hell or high water, we're going to be intentional about meeting students where they are and achieving equity beyond equality.
Cardell.
To me, what we do every day is Stand for Children. We have to advocate, and we have to advocate, as Christiane said, for our children, for our own children. We have to advocate for the children in the schools where our children go. We have to advocate for our districts, and we have to advocate for our communities, our Black and Brown communities, especially across the state and the country. And that advocacy includes several things. We have to educate and inform ourselves and each other. And whether we can do that or not, we have to act. And you can find different ways to act. You can act digitally. You can get out in the streets. You can show up at school board and city council and county commission meetings. And you can make yourself known. You can give of your time, energy, and funds to candidates who we know will stand up for us, to the efforts that we need to have to make sure that the people in elected office stand up for us and stand up for the ideals and the things that all the things that we just talked about that we are concerned about over the next 5 years. We can't drop the ball in making sure that we elect good people who we believe can do it, and whether they live up to that belief or not, that we continue to hold them accountable for putting together the plans. And then I will say, putting in place the plans. And I will say we have to work together, and we have to collaborate as organizations in our communities across the state and across the country to make sure that we are all speaking the same language, staying on the same page, and pushing for the same things that we know that we need in racial, social, and educational equity and justice.
Dr. Wilson.
I'm still thinking. Can you go to the next person, please? I'm sorry.
Okay. Christiane Buggs.
Sure. So I, of course, echo what's already been said, but I try to give people like tangible suggestions on ways that they can, get involved and not get overwhelmed. So I try to charge community members to do 2 things a month. One is reflect on, watch, engage with, or go to a city elected event. So if it's a council meeting, if it's a school board meeting, if it's a task force meeting, a committee meeting, whatever it is, if it's that the legislature is in session, try to commit just once a month to either watching or engaging in some way. Also, or the second thing I would ask is that you donate just 30 minutes of your time to a school, to a child. So it could be that you act as a lunch buddy for a student in one of our 160 schools. It could be that you advocate at some kind of level for increased supports for students in a school in your neighborhood. It could look like so many different things, but just twice a month, or once a month, do these two things: engage at the local, city, or state level, and then support a child that you don't know, that you're not related to, in some kind of tangible way.
All right, Dr. Wilson, we'll come back to you. And
I would, of course, underscore what everyone else has said, but I think more so than anything, given the pandemic and the many deaths, we've had so many deaths over the last 6 or 7 months. And so, yeah, we've had a lot of grief. And I think part of what we probably should do as a community is really acknowledge the grief that we've experienced in this moment, how unsettling it is, and also how unsettling our lives are now and how it's not normal. I think we have been trying to force normality into a very abnormal moment. We expect parents to go to work when they could lose their lives. We expect children to be focused and super engaged in their home environment that has been often their home environment, where they have not had that level of academic engagement. We expect a lot from a group of people who are we're all trying to manage through this process. I think if we can think about how to give grace to our public schools and to our children, even if they're not fully engaged, and I hear you, Kenyatta, about the learning loss, and I do worry about that deeply, but part of it is the reimagination of this moment. If we could bring together groups of people to reimagine what could learning look like, instead of it being 8 hours online with no type of management system in the home, could we not think about what does it mean to do outside education and learning sciences and environmental science? I mean, if we had leadership, we are missing leadership in this moment at the national level and at the local level, to say that instead of just trying to fit normal into an abnormal moment, that we're going to really think outside the box to create a learning environment at the K through 12th level and also at the post-secondary level too, that allows for a type of transgenerational learning moment. We can pull on the civil rights movement and look, hi, Chris. Hello, sweetie. I acknowledge all children. And so I think it's really is re-engineering this space, but you got to have leadership who got dreams. The problem is we don't got dreams for ourselves, and we don't have enough collective conversations about collective dreaming for us in this moment. And so we just take what they give us and we digest it. And so that would be my last words.
thank you. And Senator Akbari, you want to close us out and give us a mic dropping moment?
I don't know if I have it in me. I feel like Dr. Wilson's moment was a mic dropping moment, but listen, I think the bottom line is we are in circumstances I don't think any of us, I know none of us could have predicted. It's like we're living in the twilight zone every single day. And I do think, though, that this is an opportunity to not necessarily focus on the past, but more so on what we can create in the future. When we actually go back to being around each other and there's not the threat of a deadly virus, what will that look like? Workplaces have been completely disrupted. I mean, all the things that we said we couldn't do, like work from home successfully or provide internet to certain communities, all of a sudden now there's a move to do it, or paying essential workers or those who work at Kroger and places like that more than the minimum wage. Now all of a sudden we can do it. So I'd like to see us in these next several months and next couple of years really kind of step into something that is a future more like what we want it to be, right? And I do think that we're going to have different leadership. When I say I think, it really means I know, but it's a soft way, I guess, of me saying I know. But I know that we're going to have different leadership on a federal level. We're going to have different leadership on a state level. like Cardell said, you have to support candidates who really have your interests at heart and are who are going to fight to make the things happen that everyone else says is impossible, because our communities need it, our communities deserve it. And if nothing else beyond the pandemic that's been not discovered, but discovered by some, we always already knew it. It's highlighted these systemic racism and inequities that have permeated throughout society from the beginning of time for folks of color, for Black folks in America. And I'm hoping, again, as we try and rebuild or reimagine what it looks like, we're also focusing on tearing down systemic racism and trying to get to a more equitable place.
And I will close out and thank you, everyone on the panel. And Dr. Wilson, you mentioned leadership at the local level and not having vision, but I partially disagree with you because I'm looking at 6 phenomenal leaders that give me promise and hope that if you all stay the course in what you're doing, I have no doubt that things will get better and things will be the way that we need them to be. And if we need more Dr. Wilsons and Senator Akbaris and school directors and school board members and people who lead nonprofits and people who just are charged with the fight and lend their strengths and their expertise to it. And so the 6 of you have provided, hopefully to our audience, some inspiration, some hope, but also some information of how to move forward. So I want to thank you for that. And with that being stated, Ashford, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and thank you for allowing me to moderate this great panel.
Thank you, Brother Lovett. This has been a rich conversation. On behalf of the Knights of Prince Hall and the Sunbeams, we want to thank each of our panelists, our moderator, for being on here. We will definitely, we take this charge personally because we represent and we mentor young men and young women across this state, and we have their best interest, and we want to work with you all moving forward to make certain that we are providing them an opportunity to make certain that they achieve their maximum height of achievement. And we know that we can do that by working with you. Now, I'm going to ask you all as panelists can log off. We thank you for your time, and we will be following back up with you. I'm going to ask Brother Pearson and Sister McKenna to come on to give some words regarding the Knights of Prince Hall, as well as our Sunbeam organization. And thank our panelists again. Sister McKenna, and thank you, Brother Lovett. Sister McKenna, I'm gonna start with you. Give us some information about the Sunbeams, what you all are working on right now, and how the young women can get involved in your organization.
Thank you so very much. I have truly enjoyed myself being able to watch the panelists on this evening. For those of you who may not know, I am Sister Chandra McKenna, the Grand Sunbeam organizer for Excelsior Grand Chapter, Order of the Eastern Star, Tennessee Jurisdiction, Prince Hall affiliation. And I just want to take this time before I begin just to thank our most worshipful Grand Master L. Lamont Banks, Grand Worthy Matron Sister Elizabeth Cross, and Grand Worthy Patron Brother Willie L. Jackson Sr., just for giving us this opportunity to speak about our organization. Well, who are the Sunbeams? The Sunbeams are our youth organization mentored and sponsored by the Order of the Eastern Star chapters right here in Tennessee. This youth group is for young girls ranging from the ages of 7 to 18 years old. And guess what? There is no bloodline required to be a part of the Sunbeams. So you know what that means? Our arms are open wide to any young girl who would like to be a part of this great organization. Well, what would they learn by being a part of the Sunbeams? They will learn how gang awareness, how to look forward if issues arise, what they may need to do. They will learn about teen pregnancy, which has truly increased over the last couple of years in our state alone. They will learn how to fill out a job application, scholarship application, how to conduct themselves in an interview. Believe it or not, some of our youth are clueless as to the processes with that. And then when they get to the 10th grade, the 11th grade, we want to make sure that they are well equipped by the time they graduate high school and head on to college. workshops will be provided for our youth. They will learn as early as 7, 8 years old how to balance a checkbook. I wish I had learned that back in my day, but they will learn how to do that. They will learn how to save money. They will learn how to be their own boss. Who knows where this journey will take them after they graduate high school? They can be their own boss, and we want to make sure that they have all the equipment needed going forward after they graduate. Community service is a big plus. The Sunbeams do a lot of community service projects across this state of Tennessee. Now, our counselors, they assist in setting up these projects and approving them. So parents, have no fear. Your child will be in capable hands with the counselors. They have 100% supervision when they meet, 100% supervision at any events that they may be in at the point in time. So you have no worries in regards to that. Just to name a few of the Sunbeams community organizations that they have assisted with. Our sister network, which is the National African American Breast Cancer Survivors Organization. They have a big walk yearly. The Sunbeams assist by packing bags. They assist by leading participants to registration and exactly just knowing where to go throughout the actual walk. They have assisted the FedEx Family House. And these are families that come in from out of town because they have sick children that are in LeBonner's Hospital. They assist by serving food to the families, and it is a joy just to see the families come in and see the young people serving them when they have a sick child right across the street. So it's just a joy. The Dorothy's Day House, the Salvation Army, and serving disadvantaged youth at the Tennessee Children's Baptist Home. And what does this show our Sunbeams? This shows them that all children are not raised in a home with parents and siblings. So we will keep your children good and busy. You don't have to worry about that. We want to just make sure that our youth are using their time and their talents to truly make a difference in our communities. Well, how do we stand to stay in contact with our youth? We plan to stay in communication with them we stand to stay in communication with them by motivating them, encouraging them, and inspiring them. Just letting them know that they are not alone. We will send out informational packets to our youth. We will conduct Zoom meetings with our youth just to jump on as a check-in to say, how are you doing? Is there anything that you need assistance with? Are you having trouble with any classes that you may be going through? Because believe it or not, this is new for children, but it's new for the parents as well. And we want to be there to support them during this time. And with us being with the children from ages 7 to 18, you build a actual bond. We are not somebody just off the street that are dealing with your children, but now we are your extended family. We are family. And what does family do? We support one another. So we are here today supporting our youth. I want to just take this time to talk about our counselors who have done a great job keeping our youth informed, keeping them educated, and just having a great heart in being there for all of our youth. I could not have done this without them. Those counselors are Sister Bessie Sims, our Associate Grand Sunbeam Organizer, Thelma Batson, Johnny Boyd, Kimber Finney, Mary Harris, Stacy Holmes, Elnora Mallory, Christina Moody, Dorothy Scott, Kimberly Shropshire, Martha Smith, Audrey Tooley, Loretta Trice, Georgia Walters, Patricia Webster, Brandy Woods, and Felicia Flynn. thank you so much for giving us this time to talk about our organization. I didn't want to take a lot of time because I know we are sort of on a time schedule, but for more information in regards to the Sunbeams, you can reach out to ChandraMcKenner@gmail.com, and my name should be on the screen. If not, ChandraMcKinner@gmail.com. And as my grandmother would say, she would use this phrase, it takes a village. When I was younger, I did not realize what the village was, but as I grew older, I realized exactly what it takes a village is. And well, family, we are the village, and we are here to help prepare our youth for a better tomorrow. I thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to hearing from each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister McKenna. Grand State Director, Brother Bobby Pearson.
Thank you, Brother Hughes. And first off, I give thanks to our Grand Master, Lamont Banks. And I would also like to mention the names of Mac H. Reed and our Grand Master Emeritus, Arvin W. Glass, to Eric Boyd, the Deputy Director of the Knights of Prince Hall. I thank him for helping us to pull this together, as well as yourself, Brother Ashley Hughes, a job well done. To our listening audience and those that joined us on Facebook, we thank you for looking and listening in, and we hope that you will go back and find us on Facebook, for which you can get the information for the Knights of Prince Hall. We are a youth mentoring organization under the guidance of the Most Wishful Prince Hall Grand Lodge. And we thank all of the members of the Most Wishful Prince Hall Grand Lodge and the concordant bodies for being supporters of the Knights of Prince Hall. We mentor young men from the ages of 9 to 21. If there are other males in the house from the age of 7 up, we also will work with those young men. There are 3 things that we basically focus on as a mentoring organization, and they are families, literacy, and community. As families, we try to bring the children and the parents together. We have an organization, a club within the Knights of Prince Hall that is called our Parents Council. This is where we work with your child along with that parent so that both can get to know each other a little better. Literacy, as it has already been said, education is the cornerstone of us building better and stronger communities. So we are heavily involved in education. As it is expressed during these times, we have a book club that is taking place right now. As we are doing these things virtually, we are encouraging our youth to read, to read, to read. And we provide mentors to assist in that. Some of the things that we do are that we expose the young men to chivalry, learning how to act as men. We put strong men before our youth so that they learn how to become men. We assist the young men with decision-making skills, and we stress the importance of education. We help the young men develop goal-setting skills. We provide them with positive role models. Positive role model as we teach them to become role models from the top down and the bottom up. We listen to what our youth have to say. We do not just tell them what we want them to know. We listen to what it is that they need so that we can supply the wisdom so that they can make wise decisions. We stress the importance of obeying and respecting laws of the local, the state, federal agencies, but most important, the laws of their parents. We want to be the premier mentoring organization across the state. We partner with other social organizations so that we do not have to duplicate things that are already doing. We watch for best practices in other social organizations where we can provide volunteers to assist and they in turn assist us. We want to work with you and your children, most especially those that are part of the Masonic family, but in the community as a whole. From one end of this state to the other, we are here to assist you. Brother Hughes, I turn it back over to you. Job well done.
Thank you, Grand State Director. We thank our audience this evening for being with us tonight. Again, wanting to recognize our most worshipful Grand Master of Masons, Prince Hall affiliated, Brother Lamont Banks, for his leadership during this time. We all know that we are going through unprecedented times right now, but we are laser focused on helping our youth achieve their maximum potential. Any civilization, you're only as good as the future of your kids. And that is the energy and that is the belief that we take in every day when we come across working with our young men and our young women. There's two quotes I'm gonna leave us with as we leave out today. One is by Nelson Mandela. Education is the most important weapon which you can use to change the world. We aim to make literacy so vitally important so that we can change the world for our community. We know that our communities are facing a lot of turmoil right now, but we believe within our organizations, we can be the change. We are who we are waiting for, and now is our time to step up. As I leave you today, the world is at a loss for the untimely passing of Brother Chadwick Boseman, who played the fictitious yet important character, the Black Panther, a character that many young Black men, young Black boys looked up to as their first vision of what a superhero looks like. He was our superhero, and we're praying for his family. And I'm gonna leave you with a quote from him within the Black Panther itself. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way to look after one another as if we were in one single tribe. That is what our organization is asking today, that the community, we come together as one single tribe and put our arms and embrace our young people during this time of digital and virtual learning and help them steer themselves through this. We need to work together as a community for our kids because they're depending on us moving forward. We thank you for your time. We will have information on our Facebook page and follow up with everybody about what was talked about today. Please make certain that you get your kids the help that they need and reach out to your parents, get involved with your school board. Everyone have a blessed Sunday, and we will make certain that we will continue to stay in contact with you over the next months and weeks. God bless.